Hello everyone. In this video, I wanted to show you in this guide how to basically build our frequency tables for both our categorical and our numerical data. So here we go. It says, here is some data that your boss collected on ages of paying customers at his ice cream shop. He asks you to summarize it. The thing is, he's not giving you a bunch of direction. You decide to do some simple frequency tables. Here's the data that he collected. So you can either download this as a CSV file, or we can just copy our data. So if you download it, I'm gonna kind of click on download so you can like, you go to your downloads, open up the CSV file, second, and it will open up the entire thing here. So that's one way that you can do it. The other way that you can get your data is you just literally click on the data, you highlight across, and if you come off to the right side of the edge, it will copy all the way down. You do a copy, and then over here with right click and a special as text, and then you can have it in there as well. Either way that you want to do it is totally fine. If you notice, like with our columns, sometimes in Excel, like we don't get all of like names in the actual cells that we want. If you come up between A and B and you do a double click, it will resize it to make sure that everything is in the right is within the cell. You double click in between B and C, it scales to the B, and if you double click in between the C and the D, it does that click. And if you notice when I go between C and D, my cursor kind of changes to that arrow that goes like left and right, and it just helps to resize that. That's really nice. Some other things that you can do to like just make things a little bit easier to view. I'm going to click on A and highlight all the way through C. I'm going to go to my home in this quick, and I'm going to center all of things so that it's a little bit easier to read. Now, you don't have to do that. You can also do like right justified if you want to do from the right side, but that kind of helps you be able to make it so that it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so now that we've got our data, we can start taking a little bit of a look at it. So first of all, data always gets pasted in the correct format. So remember that if you do a paste, let me just show you about pasting. We'll copy this in, copy, and watch if I just try to do just a standard paste, just a paste. This one kind of does it with all of the, like how it looks like in the other data. Sometimes it will, oopsies, sometimes it will only paste it in a single column, and that's a problem too. So like if we do, oh no, that one worked too. See if I do just paste as like here, it looks like that there's a bunch of different ways that you can paste it, but sometimes when you paste it in, it will just paste it into a single column. So sometimes you have to work with how you paste it. So data always gets pasted in the correct format. No, the one way that really does work like every single time, right click, paste, and go to text. Or if you're on a Mac, you go to paste special and you click the text. Okay, so now that we're done that, the frequency tables can be used for categorical and numerical data. That is correct. Like we can build these for either categorical or numerical, but in Excel, it's going to be a couple of different ways that we actually go about doing it. So let's kind of take a look at that. Okay, so define labels and symbols. So mark all that are common names for this kind of range from 5 to 10. So that can be called a bin. It can be called a class, and it can be called a range. Those are the three main like ways that people talk about them: is a range, a class. Okay, matching the labels to our definition. So an open parentheses is a exclude the value. It's going to be F. Here for this is it's a open interval where we are not including either of them. So that's a C. Here it's a closed lower, open upper. So E. For this one, it's going to be a open lower, closed upper. B. This is going to be include the value. So that's A. And then here is going to be a closed interval where we include both of them. So we got everything right. Yep, F C E A B. Correct. Yours might be in a different order, but the linking is going to be the same between. Okay, so let's explore some categorical and numerical frequency tables. So if we match the data types to their justification, so ordinal data is categorical data with a natural order, so A. B is a categorical order, or so numerical is just going to be numbers. C, and nominal is categorical with no natural orders. That'll be our B. Okay, so the purpose. So why do we create frequency tables? Okay, is it to simply summarize the data? That's true. To find patterns? Yep. And all are valid reasons. Yep, both of those are valid reasons why we would want to. Okay, so now we actually have some interpreting our frequency table. So the first question, it says, how many of the customers had an age in the range of 30 to 40? Okay, so let's take a look at like what's going on. So notice how we have kind of this open interval here and a closed interval up here. Let's go ahead and make our first one. So if you remember, we went in and we added in a add-in, and I'll just show you how to do that one more time. If you already have it, it's called that data analysis Toolpak. But if we get it, we just go to File, Options, Add-ins. Second, sometimes it takes a second for it to get to the page. Go down to the Manage the Excel add-ins and click Go. And make sure that we have these couple clicked, like Analysis Toolpak and the Solver. Go ahead and click OK. And now we can click the Analysis Toolpak. Now if you have a Mac, if you click on this data part of the ribbon, there's usually a gear over here that you can click on. You click on the gear and then it'll take you to the pop-up box where you can select the data analysis. So we're going to go ahead and click the data analysis and you should get a little pop-up box. And in order to build a numerical frequency table, we're going to do that using the histogram function inside of our data analysis. So go down, click on the histogram and click OK. So for the input range, we need to be able to select this data here. And then we'll have a bin range where it will tell us how big our ranges are. Notice how we are kind of going in, looks like steps of 10 from like we're going from 30 to 40. We need to build real quick our steps so that it knows how big to go. So I'm just going to put here. I'm just going to put here for our first one, a bin of 10, 20, 30, through 40, through 50. We'll do, I guess, 60 as well. So this is telling us the bins that they're going to go in. And let me just go ahead and build this thing real quick for us. So let's go click on data analysis. We're going to click on histogram and click OK. The input range, I want it to be the customer age. Oh, you know what? Let me go up to one more thing and I'll label this as bins. Okay, last time, sorry. Here we go, histogram, click OK. Input range, I'm going to click on customer range, and then I'm going to highlight all the way down. Now, I could highlight all the way down, but scrolling all the way down like takes a long time. Like you have to go all the way to like 200 observations or something. So there's a really nice shortcut. On your keyboard, if you push Control Shift down, it will go all the way down to the last entry. And so that is our input range. I'm going to scroll back up for the bin range, and I'm going to highlight my bins, just like this. And I'm also going to click that we have labels, because if we don't, it gets messed up because this first line is the label. Next thing that I want to do is I want to say that the output is on, I don't want it to be in a new spot, like you could open up and put it on a new sheet, but I want to tell it where I want it on the output. So I'm just going to click anywhere on the sheet that doesn't have any data in it. So I'm going to click right here. And let's see, I don't need any of this. Let's also do a cumulative percent, just add on something in there. We'll click OK. And here we go. So we have a little bit of information here. It's not everything that we need, but it is some good stuff. So we have the frequency and we have the cumulative percent, and we can build off of this in order to build a full frequency table. Let me highlight this and kind of move it around. I'm going to shift it over 2 spots because of how I want to build up this frequency table. All right, so the first thing says, how many of the customers had an age in the range of 30 to 40? So what that means is how these bins are actually working here. Let's see if I can just type in. Yes, it is. So let's go look at this. It says 106, and that actually is 106, and it says 40. How these bins actually work are, let's write it out. It is like this: 30, 40, with an end brace. That's what this is actually doing when it says the bins. It's saying what the upper limit is. And then we can do it on this one too. We have like 20, comma, and 30. That's what's going on in here in our cell. This. Another one real quick, like 0. I'll finish this up real quick. It's here, 40, 50. Excel's just kind of doing like a shorthand of this, not including kind of the left side, just saying where the bins 8 end at, and then more, it's saying is there anything over that 60. Okay, so this is how we build our frequency table. And this gives us just the counts. Now, if we want like what's called a relative frequency, there's a few things that we can do. So the other thing that we want to do is we want to come down here and do a total. And the total here is going to be how many observations did we have. And there's a nice, easy function that we get to use. And it's the function called sum. And I'm going to just highlight all of this data. If I say sum, I'm going to say, hey, add up all the observations here. And it should be the same as the number of rows that we had that we were looking at, which should be 200, which is exactly what we want. Now, relative frequency is just saying, okay, what percentage of our responses were between 0 and 10? There were 0 here. So we could just do equals 0 divided by 200. And we can hit enter, and that would be our first percentage. And then our second one, we can do equals, click on the 1, divide by the 200, and click. And that would be the percentage of responses that were between that kind of 10 and 20 bin. Okay, there's an easier way to do this with Excel. So instead, what we can do is Excel keeps these functions so that if I were to just drag this function down, it would say, hey, take the cell directly to the left and divide it by the one that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 below. So check this out. If I just grab this corner and drag it down, I now get this divide by 0. It's like, aha, what happened? I just wanted it to do this one and divide it by the bottom. Look what it did. It took the one to the left and divided by the one that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's handy, but it's not quite what I wanted. I want them always to be divided by 200. Well, what we can do is we can lock this position. So if we click on this E17 where it's this red value, and we do, we push F4. Now, if you're on like a laptop or something, oftentimes there's like a function button that you need to hold down, and then you push F4. But what it does is it surrounds it with dollar signs. Dollar signs in both positions in front of the letter and the number fully locks the rows and the columns. If you just have it by just a dollar sign by the E, it locks the column, but it's able to slide up and down. If you lock just the row of 17, it locks the row, but it allows you, or so yes, it locks the row, but allows you to slide in the columns. So here we have both a dollar sign in front of the E and a dollar sign in front of the 17. And that's going to allow us to very easily do all of these calculations very quickly. Notice how I just drug it down? And let's click on one. Notice it took this E14 divided by this lock cell of 200, which is really nice. So now we have this relative frequency. The cumulative, not resizing this, okay, whatever. We'll resize it by hand. This cumulative percentage says, hey, what's the percentage of a cell and everything below? Cell and everything below. So like, and we'll get back to this one because this one helps out too. Let's also do what's called a cumulative frequency. Okay, a cumulative frequency is saying, okay, how many people were like, oh, we're looking at the age of these observations, I think. Yes, customer age. Okay, we'll say like how many people were 30 years old or less. There's 8 here, but we can build a column here that actually does this for us. Remember how we use the sum thing? We're actually going to do that, but in the first cell, we just want to sum the first column, the first cell. This cell here, we want to sum up these two. Next one down, we want to sum up the 3. The next one down, we want to sum up the 4. The next one down, we want to sum up the 5, etc., etc. There's a cool thing that we can do with locking our equations. Look what we can do. We can type sum. And for this first one, we want to sum from this first cell. And then we put a colon, and we say to the second cell, which is really nice. Okay, we're just going to sum from this first one to the second one. That's great. Now, when we drag it down, notice how it just did, it's still just summing from here to here. I want it always to be starting up at the top. There's a way that we can do this. So what we're going to do is, just how we kind of locked this one cell when we were doing the relative frequency, we can lock a single cell as well. So I'm going to lock this first cell that I'm always going to start from E10, and then I'm going to sum to whatever is directly across. So this first one is going to be from E10 to E10. And let me drag it down just a little bit to show you what's happening. If I click on this one, notice how it's summing from E10 all the way to E13. And then from here, summing from E10 to E14, because I locked that first spot. And I'm going to drag it all the way down. So that's how you build a full frequency table using some of the tools from Excel. So using the data analysis histograms, we chose what the input range is. We told what we wanted our bin sizes to be. We said that we had labels at the top. We gave it an output range. We also said that we wanted a cumulative percentage. And that gave us the bins, the frequencies, and the cumulative percentage. And then we just built real quickly the relative frequency and the cumulative frequency. And then we have all 4 parts of a complete frequency. All right, let's see if we can answer one of these questions now. All right, so how many of the customers had an age in the range of 30-40? Look at 30-40, 106. There we go. Okay, so next is what is the percent of the customers identified as male? Okay, so male is different because instead of being a piece of numerical data, we have a piece of categorical data. And specifically, we have a piece of categorical data that is nominal. It doesn't have any specific order that it should be in. For this one, we are going to use a slightly different tool. And the tool that we are going to be using is called a pivot table. You may have used one of these before, but what you do is you come up here to your ribbon, and we're going to go to Insert. We're going to go to Tables, and we're going to click on Pivot Table. I'm just going to go ahead and click on Pivot Table here. And the first thing that it's going to ask me is okay, what is the table range? Or what are we going to put inside of our pivot table? I'm just going to tell it, I'm going to grab gender, and I'm going to do Control-Shift down so that it says that I select all of my data here. And I'm going to say it's going to be in the existing worksheet, and then I got to tell it where I want it to go. So I'm going to delete out that. I'm going to come right below the bins that we just did for the age, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And right now it pops up, and it is completely blank and useless. So what we have to do is we have to tell it, these pivot tables, what do you want inside of the pivot table? So I want the gender inside of the pivot table, and notice how it pops up the row labels of female, male, and other. And then what we need to do is I'm going to drag down this gender into the value box right here so that we can see that it has the count of gender. Now, when I come back and look at this, look at what we've got. We now have how many people identified as female, how many people identified as male, how many people identified as other, and for a grand total of our 200. That's great. But the question is what percent of the customers identified as male? What we want here is a relative frequency. So here I am going to click on E21. The one thing that I don't like about clicking on E21 is that it's it dives into a bunch of code here, and it's I don't really want to deal with that. What we can also do is just type in E21, just like Battleship, and notice, hey, it highlights the exact cell that I want. Woohoo! Then I'm going to divide by what is that, 24, which is this one right down there. Oh, not E34. Woo! E24. There we go. Now it's highlighted. E24. And I'm going to lock it again. So again, the F4 button, when you're highlighted or you clicked on that E24, will lock that cell. And I'm going to hit enter. Now I can drag it down. And let's double click and make sure that it actually is doing what I want. Yep, it's doing this 84 divided by the total of 200, which gives me my relative frequency, or the percentage of people who said that they identified as male. And so we said 42%, and here it is 42%. Now, in my open math, I want your percentages responded in decimal form unless there is a percentage sign immediately to the right of the box. So here, this one is in fact 42%. Okay, the next one that we have is how many of the customers had a neutral or a worse experience. Okay, so now we're going to do our ordinal categorical data. So notice how we have this is still categories with like satisfied, unsatisfied, extremely satisfied, neutral. But you also see that there's like a numerical listing here as well. Like we want to put these in from extremely dissatisfied to extremely satisfied. When you are dealing with these frequency tables, like this entire frequency table that we did for the numerical data is really useful, but it doesn't make sense when we're dealing with nominal data, because saying like less than male or does not make any sense. Because we can reorder these in any order. But we can't say how many customers had a neutral or worse experience. So we want these whole frequencies and the cumulative frequency and the cumulative relative frequency because they actually make sense. So we're going to build this for ordinal data as well with our pivot table. It's going to take just a little bit of steps, but it's not a problem. First thing we're going to do again is go to Insert, Tables, and Pivot Table. I got to tell it the range that I want. So I need to put in the satisfaction range, and I'm going to push Control-Shift down to highlight all the data. I want to put it in the existing worksheet, and I got to tell it where I want to put it. I'm going to put it right below here. Just click there. I want to click OK. Notice how it's empty again. That's okay. I'm going to click on satisfaction, and then I'm going to drag satisfaction to the values, and it should give me my counts. And notice how it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gives me my counts. And let's get we're going to do our relative frequency. We're going to do our cumulative frequency, and we'll do our cumulative relative frequency. Don't want to type the whole thing. Okay, relative frequency. Let's do this. So we're going to do our little bit of battleship. So E27 divided by E32. Notice how they're highlighted on what I want. And then I'm going to lock, which is that F4, that E32, hit enter, and I can drag this down. Okay, so that's the relative frequency of each of those. Let's do the cumulative frequency. So this one again was equals sum. We want to click on this first one. Oops, not click on the first one because you can do it that way, but it's kind of ugly. Let's go ahead and do E27 colon E27, and we're going to lock one of those. It actually doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to choose the first one, F4. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to drag this down. It should end at 200 because if I've summed everything up, equal 200 here, sum up from the cell directly across and everything above. And that is the number of a value or less. And that continues. Relative frequency, or the cumulative relative frequency, is going to be equal to this guy divided by the total. And I will do again, what is that, E32? I'm going to lock that E32, hit enter, and then I want to drag this down. And you should, when you have it right, the very last one should always be 100. Okay, so let's look at this. How many of the customers had a neutral or worse experience? So that's how many people had neutral, dissatisfied, or extremely dissatisfied. Now we could just count up 69, 48, and 24 and add them together. That's great. That's what the cumulative relative frequency did, right? Whoopsies. The cumulative relative frequency did 69 plus 48 plus 24 for the neutral. This is how many people had a neutral or worse experience. And that's 141. Okay, last one. How many of the customers had an age of more than 40? Okay, well, we've got to go back up to our 40s now. So we want to go of more than 40. Well, more than 40 is, we don't actually have a direct way to get it in here. Like it's not just in our cumulative relative frequency, because here, this is 40 or less. but I want 40 or more. So if we notice, that would mean that we need to add up all of these other cells. So we need to add up 75 plus 11 plus 0. So what I'm just going to do, I'm going to do equals sum. I'm just going to highlight these frequencies. And that's going to be my value of age of greater than 40. And so I say that there were, oh, oops, I did too many. Greater than 40 is going to be this one. So I say 86, and that's our answer. So that is how we do in Excel using our analysis toolpak of building our different frequency tables. So if we're dealing with numerical data, we need to use the histogram function in the analysis toolpak. And if we're dealing with categorical data, we are going to be using pivot tables. Now, if we have ordinal data, we want all of these cells of the relative frequency, cumulative frequency, and cumulative relative frequency. But if we're dealing with nominal data, we only need the relative frequency. Okay, that's it. Best of luck on your studies and utilizing this to do your homework.